Okay. Hi, everybody. We are live on Facebook and we're here back again for another Take an Art Break podcast. And today we're lucky to have Rae Luskin joining our conversation.
Welcome.
Rae is an artist, an activist, an author. She's authored multiple books, including one which I love, The Creative Activist. And this subtitle is just perfect for just all around. There it is. Yeah. Make the world better, one person, one action at a time. And Art is Moving is just totally vibes with that. She's helped hundreds of people heal, find self-worth, create social change through creative expression. So I am so excited to have you here with us. We had a great chat with you back in September, so I can't wait to have another one with you today.
I know, me too. I mean, and this obviously is one of my favorite subjects of all times. So I do have to say right off the bat, I'm missing my two front teeth. That's all I want for Christmas. So it's a little weird. Sometimes I spit, so it's a good thing we're not in the same room, and what can I tell you? That little bit of a lisp. Sometimes it's easier for me just to say it. I was singing All I Want for Christmas is My Two Front Teeth for the last few months. So I will get them by May, which is my birthday. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yes, that's good. That's awesome.
Right. So, it's one of those things. It's like what I was thinking, I have a mask. I don't ever have to show my face. Oh. And then I'm like, you have to. This is part of life. There are things that happen. Yeah. And, we may not like our looks. But again, this is part of being an activist, too, is talking about weird things that may happen to you and telling these stories. Because to me, when I talk about art, it is not just being, painting or photograph. It's a story. It is a message that we all have to share with someone. And it could be the most minute thing or the biggest thing in our lives and how it changed us and propelled us into other parts of our lives. And so that's why I'm sharing this. I could have I do have some fake teeth that the dentist made, but I'm like, no, I'm going to be honest, because I think that's part of being an activist, is being vulnerable. And really being that creative activist is sharing who we are, what we're going through at that moment in time. So
I love that, because Lauren and I started this podcast because we wanted to talk about art really authentically and really, vulnerable. Not the fine art world, but kind of like the.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this live. We're recording it live. There's going to be no editing. This is us in our true form. So
right. And I applaud you for that, because that's how I like to have conversations with people without the editing, because this is where the juice is. This is where the real heart of the person is seen. And I think all three of us are about, we want to give people a voice. We want to give them a safe place to be seen and heard. And that's what you're doing with everything you do and with everything that I do. And that's activism. That is making a difference and having purpose. And you two are amazing at what you do and stuff. So I'm thrilled.
Well, you're amazing. Well, we'd love to kind of pose the question, how can art help you find your purpose? Because I know that's what you're really all about. And then preface it also with, how did art help you find your own purpose, Rae?
Okay, well, I'll go back with my backstory. So that's the way that I can really share this. I was sexually abused as a child by my grandfather, who was an artist, and it was in his art studio. So for years, I go to his art studio, and he'd have fun with me. And I was 7 at the time when it started. So, I didn't know what was going on. Nobody did. And I'm 70, so nobody ever talked about these things. So you didn't know what was happening. And so art has always been a part of my life in so many ways. Yeah. And it was a big struggle for a long time. And, I was that kid who, wanted to sing, and they told me mouth the words in choir. I had a teacher tell me I was a terrible writer. And then in college, I had a professor tell me, get out of art because you are a horrible artist.
Oh my God.
He kicked me out of his class, and he said, get a different, and I didn't have the stamina to say, no, you're crazy. And I didn't know at the time I was having flashbacks either. So it was sort of like the smell of turpentine and oil paints did it, and I didn't have anything for that. So that's sort of the real backstory.
Right.
So art has always been a big piece of me, but I finally went into talk therapy when I was in my 20s. I quit college as a senior, did not go over well in my family. And, but I did go back and I got a master's too. But in the meantime, you know, I quit, I went into talk therapy and I got healthy enough to have, you know, get in a relationship, get married and have kids. But I still suffered. The depression was so severe, you know, and nothing I could do. I wanted to kill myself. It was, I'd get my kids off to school. I'd crawl back in bed. I mean, dirty laundry everywhere. My hair was greasy and oily. You know, you didn't want to be around me. But at the same time, I never let the rest of the world know. You know, my kids look great. They never had any inkling that mom was depressed. You know, I pulled it together for them.
Wow.
And one day I just said, I've had enough. And I was going to kill myself. So I started to make a list of 88. Yeah, and I wrote it out, all the bad things that happened in my life. And I had 88 and I quit. I said, okay, now you better start on the other side. What are the good things? And at the time, you know, it was my kids, obviously, and I had a house and I had a nice husband. But I said, okay, I'm going to do everything in my power to get healthy for my children. And so I started journaling, you know, which again is an art form. Writing gratitude lists, did wells, you know, and some days it was, okay, I washed my hair, the sun rose, you know, and it could have been the same thing forever. And, you know, I kept going on. And because, you know, I was an artist at one point, I hadn't picked up a paint. I hadn't done anything 12 years at this point. I had never picked up anything, but I had crayons in the house for the kids. And one day I just picked up a black crayon and I started to scribble. And the tears were pouring down my face. The rage was coming out of me. I could not believe. And again, I didn't know what a somatic response was. I didn't know we kept things in ourselves, you know, so it was like, okay, this is what you have to do. And the art became, you know, it was like, it saved me. I mean, it became my my safety net. It became my superpower because once I started to release and using, and it was scribbles and doodles. It wasn't, you know, fine art. It was scribbles and doodles. And I always work with people and I tell them to start with scribbles and doodles. And I tell them to close their eyes, use your non-dominant hand. You can't judge yourself, you know, but it is a way to express yourself. And that sort of led me on my journey and making a decision and finding out that art could heal. I didn't know anything about art therapy or any of these things, and found out that, you know, wow, it not only creates beauty, but it's a healing tool. And I made this decision. I would become a workshop junkie, you know, self-help person. And I started following people all over the country. This was before Hay House and, you know, Oprah, and it was transformational psychologists had their body and soul conferences, and I traveled all over. And that's how I tapped into who I was and my purpose. But it was a combination of doing art, of writing, of then expressing myself. And I used art. I actually did do some pieces that were personal pieces about how I felt. And if you could hold on 1 minute, I'm going to grab one painting just to show you. Okay.
Great. It's a beautiful.
I know. I was just admiring that. That's a great background. I need to have a nice background to mine. You have your paintings up behind you too. Yeah. I should make a virtual background of some of my work.
Oh, that would be really cool.
I did a series of artwork, you know, my pain pieces, I called them, you know, and over the years, and they were always in black and white and dull tones, and it was the depression and this, and, you know, and I had tons of these pieces. And then one day I noticed my color started to change. And it was like an inkling I started to change. So, ouch, I just stuck myself. But this was called Door of Truth.
Oh.
And it was the first time I really started using color again, you know? And it was like, who did I have to become to step through that door to live a different life? And knowing that I had to share my story. I had to share my journey of healing. And that's how I found my passion. You know, it was sort of like using the arts as a doorway into my soul, into my healing.
Yeah.
And then as an expression of who I really am, and there are other angel stories along the way, it's sort of, I went to a conference with my ex-husband now, well, he's deceased actually, but we had gone to a conference in California, and I seated next to this gentleman. And this is after I'd made the decision, I will do anything, right? And he starts talking to me about yoga and visualization and things that I had actually explored when I was like 18 and 19 years old. But I had an out-of-body experience, and there was no internet. There was no way to know that anybody else experienced this. I thought it was just crazy. So I stopped doing these things, and,
Right.
and so, we had this conversation. It was like this light bulb went off. And the next day I went to the local bookstore and I got 2 books. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers, which became my mantra for many, many, many years. And the next one was Creative Visualization by Shakti Gwen.
Oh.
Okay, it was a pivotal book in my life. It was one of those aha moments that said, okay, because I didn't have a view of what my life could be. I didn't understand that I could take the pain that I experienced and make a difference. I didn't know that that was even possible. It wasn't in the realm of my consideration. So I started to visualize things, and I did it by a visual diary. So I would start, and this is when, The Artist's Way came out, and she had you writing. I instead had you collecting images. Instead, because there were too many people who were saying, but my husband's reading my words and this, there's no safety in my home. So I said, just get images and start putting those in a book, because you're the only one who can interpret those images then. And so I started doing that kind of stuff. And then, and it kept leading me on this thing. I have a purpose. I didn't know. I never heard the term purpose, up until then. And it's like, what does that mean? Well, I'm here to make a difference. I never knew that. And, and I kept saying, I don't want anybody else to go through what I went through. I want to share my story and talk about terrifying. I finally, got up the courage, and I went to my health club and I said, health is more than exercise. So I want to have a day of health and healing. And I organized it and had a couple of speakers, and I was one of them. And it was the first time I ever told my story.
Wow.
And this girl came up to me afterwards and she said, you saved my life. And to this day, that is what motivates me to keep going. I want to inspire people to take their story, their pain, whatever cause. It could be mom was an addict, dad was an alcoholic, somebody lost a job, we lived in a car. And find ways to express your story. And yes, it is through art, but art is much broader than just being a painter or a ceramicist. It is a much broader concept to me.
So I'm hearing that your personal purpose that you found by sort of navigating your own personal story through art is help other people navigate their own pain by using art, and also to tell people that they don't even have to ever pick up a paintbrush in order to get there.
Right. All I ask them is I always say, if you can hold a crayon, you will be successful. It's about play, explore, experiment, and that you have that ability. And and the Creative Activist, as it's got 36 stories of people who've done incredible things, and they're not all artists, but they've all made a difference. And I think that's what's key for me. It's like, what are we doing to make a difference, to make the world a better place? I want to, tell people, don't let circumstances outside of you, or tell yourself you're too old or you're too young. You look at Greta Thunberg, and then all the people who've done things in their late 70s and 80s. I want people to know that there are no limits to your purpose and your calling, but it takes work. It takes time to actually explore and to find out who you are, to answer the question, who am I? Why am I here? What are my gifts and talents? How can I make a difference? All that. And what is the legacy I want to leave?
Beautiful.
Yeah, I feel like when I think of the question, how can art help you find your purpose? I mean, I relate very well to what you're saying. It's like you use the art in order to sort of unpack everything that is you, that you can kind of take another step forward into what it is you will do, right? Because I would define purpose as like, a purpose is what you can use your qualities to make good, a positive change, right?
Right.
So finding your purpose would be knowing yourself well enough to know how you can contribute positively to the future or the present time.
Right.
I think the way that art can help you do that is by we talk about this a lot, becoming more self-aware
Right.
of who you actually are.
Right. It does make you self-aware, and it also has the ability to educate and create awareness in others, so it's dual purpose, because there is always the one who creates it, and there's also the witness if you're willing to share it.
Right.
And whatever that looks like. And so that can open up greater conversations and create greater change. We've seen so much about what's happened, with Black Lives Matters over the last, year and stuff like that. And, and things opened up stories. I ended up taking a class with a Florida studio theater company. And each week we were reading plays written by Black playwrights and a white playwright. So there'd be both. And we get to see what their voice said and how they did it, and created new conversations. And so that's why I love that. And I love the term creative activist, because we all can do that with whatever we are investing our time and energy in, like you do with what your work is. Yeah. And I know, I think, Lisa, you're going to be speaking at one of the conferences. Is it AIDA or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing a workshop. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's taking what you know and your story and giving them an opportunity to say, hey, I could do that too. It's like, I want to inspire people. I want to ignite their spark of interest, and, and also just give them hope, that what your past is doesn't dictate who you are and your future.
Yeah, what I love of your story, and that I align with that story. I know that story,
Yeah.
but it is like you, as you open the door, right, to the person, and once they take the leap through the door, then they have to tell their story, their real story, and like scratch it out, scribble it out.
Right.
And then the transformation comes when you are like, hey, I can create a new story. I can be larger than myself. I can make a big difference in the world.
Yeah, I had an acronym for ART. A is awareness. R is it is oh God, now I'm drawing blank, but it's retelling your story.
Yeah.
And then the T is the transformation. Who do you become in the process? So there are those three in that acronym, and it is, and we have that choice. And I think too many of us are still in the victim mode, that they get stuck there and they don't realize you have a choice how you want to feel or what you want to do with your life. And that is also part of my purpose, to tell people you have a choice. Whether you're thinking of Viktor Frankl in the Holocaust or Anne Frank. She's talked about, here's a 13-year-old girl hiding, and talk about we're never, at any moment you can create change. Those are stories that inspire me and say, hey, what do I have to say? And what can I do with my life?
So yeah, what would you say to that person who is like responding to this conversation in a sense that it's like, well, it's worked for you three. What do I do? Like, how do I even get started? Because I feel like all three of us are like on this, we know that art can do it because we've experienced it. We've taken that scary step, that really scary step of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. So how do you get someone who is sort of not ready to open that door yet? What's the first step that they can take towards finding their purpose with art?
Well, as I said before, I really believe in the power of a scribble and doodle, because it's a two-part process. So with the scribble, you can just start, you can either ask a question, and I do that often. I'll say, so what is my purpose? And I'm a blank or whatever it is. And then you allow yourself to go into this deep space and just scribble. And then what I would say is, what colors did you use? Because I'll say scribble first with one color, then another, and then color it in. And now if you're coloring in the lines, switch outside and color outside the lines, turn the page, so that you are now not just in the boundaries of what you're used to. And then I would have them say, okay, what colors did you use? Free associate what those colors are. So, it's blue water, green money, whatever, purple mountain majesty. And then I have them write a story like Once Upon a Time. And they use all the words that they've used. And, because you're also looking at saying, oh, I see a heart in here, or how did that make you feel? Because, I'm obviously you have to have some probing questions in there to get them to think.
Right.
But did anything surprise you? How did it feel to, color outside the lines? So then they start writing this, and then it starts taking them into another place, because again, you're not thinking about it. It's not your normal thought process. So you are bypassing a lot of the intellect and getting into your heart. I call, I like to work with people. I call them heart storming sessions, where I actually work with them to do that as sort of, excuse me, like a 30-minute just introduction to see if there's, something I can do to help them, and, if they're really ready to make a decision to go forward. And I do these free, and I will do them for people who want to contact me after this. I've got a few openings this week and next week, and we will go through a series of questions. I'm big on asking questions. If you're not willing to answer the questions, then you're not willing to do the work yet. You don't have to the answers, and you don't need to know the how, but you have to be willing to explore, experiment, and play.
Yeah.
Powerful. It also draws, you were talking about the witness, but this process that you're talking about is you're really seeing them for who they really, really are. And I think that's what scares a lot of people, And
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think that's why art is scary for a lot of people, because I think, like you just said, it was like a dual process, right? It's the artist and it's the viewer. I walked into the MoMA one time and saw a painting and I started crying, and I still to this day have no idea why I started crying. There's definitely a reason I needed to let go of that emotion, but a lot of people don't want to go there, because I was standing in a public building and there were like tons of people standing around me looking at me like, this lady is crying in front of a painting. And I had experienced stuff like that before, so I was definitely more comfortable, but that will happen. Like, imagine
art touches the soul. You can't force somebody into this process. They have to reached a pain point and said, I can't live like this anymore. I'm miserable. I'm not the person who's going to force anything. You need a therapist. I am the extra that gets you catapulted to a new level. And that's how I look at it. I'm not the therapist anyway, but I give you tools that will help you get further in your journey. And not everybody has the same goals as far as the journey. Some people are like, I just want to feel a little better, and other people want to say, this part of my life is fabulous and I only want to lose weight, or I want this, we sort of subdivide our lives into this. And our calling, our contribution is sort of the last thing, it's like the world owes me, so you have to reach a level of self-mastery on some level and awareness before I think you can get into a calling and a purpose.
What do you think, Lisa? How can art help you? How can art help you find your purpose?
Great question. Well, I love this conversation. I love this kind of like art is a story, art is your story. And I love that, going into your dark wounds. But it's interesting because you get wounded along the art path by a professor, by a teacher, by a parent. And so it's like multi-layered. It's not just, your own trauma, but it's the wounds that come from creating and trying to express your true authentic self. So
cows aren't purple. Color inside the lines. Stop daydreaming. We've all experienced that. And it's hard sometimes for me, because I've been on this journey for such a long time, to go back to the beginning. And I realize I'm not the person to work with to go back to the beginning. I did that for a long time when I first got into this. It was like I only worked with abused women. I'm like, okay, this is not where I want to be. It burned me out. And I said, I want the person who wants to take whatever their challenges are, whatever the causes that have touched their heart, and do something with it. So I recognize that in myself, and that was hard because I consider myself this kind, compassionate person, but it's like, but I don't want to help everybody anymore, you know.
Well, and you can't, you have to be, that's
right.
That's another thing. You have to be honest with yourself. That's another reason I love this process that you're talking about, all the journaling and the doodling and the scribbling and those are tactics for getting that out of your body and realizing that it's okay, that you're better off, you know, knowing what you're supposed to be doing than trying to do everything.
Right.
Because, you know, you don't serve everyone when you're trying to do, you know, when you're trying to help everybody. That's why there's so many people in the world, because we each can have our own little nook and cranny that we help. And if we all did that, then imagine what the world would be like. Imagine if everybody took the time to know how they could contribute positively and focused on that. You know, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
So what would you say if you had just a sentence or two, both of you, to say what your purpose was? I'm just curious.
Lauren?
Yeah, I would say that my purpose is to get as many people possible to, I feel like I'm at the beginning. You know how you said you're more in the back end. I'm at the beginning. I'm trying to get people who have never done art or don't remember doing art to do it, try it again. I'm trying to make art less scary for people. And so I love your like art of scribble and things like that, because I think of my mom often. My mom will come to art break days and she's my best volunteer. And she always says to people, just take some paint and swish it around for a little while. And that really helps people understand that it's a process based. So my purpose is to make art less scary and to really encourage people to just kind of to realize it's easier to do than they might think.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think the idea of artist process, that was a big thing for me, you know, realizing it wasn't about a product. You know, I had an art school for a long time as well. You know, this is before I started doing this work. And, you know, and I was teaching something called Monart. And it was much more about learning to see, but also it should, you know, it had to look like something. And it didn't quite gel with where I was. And so then I developed Art from My Heart, which I did with families and, you know, and many of the women who were abused and stuff, which became all about process. You know, I said, we have to go on this journey together, whether we're talking about our bodies, about, you know, and I do believe we have to teach this to our children. You know, it has to start early to counterbalance the school, the educational system that says art is, you know, first thing cut in the budget, you know, yet it is so imperative for learning and teaching and, you know, all that kind of stuff that we don't have that. So I feel we have to talk about that as well. So I think that's wonderful.
I love it. My mission, I mean, for me, art saved my life too. So what I try to teach people and, you know, inspire people that art can really save you and it can transform you. So my mission is art is the catalyst for transformation and healing. And so what I love to do is kind of like spark people that they can find something larger than themselves. Because when you're really creating, even if it's scribbles, and all of a sudden your hand starts moving kind of automatically, you're tapping into something larger than yourself. And I think once you tap into that, I mean, the creative source of everything, I think you become harmonized. So you become like you're in balance and harmony. So
we are the creators of our own future. And if we adopt that message, creative, you know, and I mean, I've been on a spiritual journey as long as I've been on this healing journey, you know, because I felt it was a vengeful God, why me, you know, all those things, and spent a lifetime saying, you know, and walking away from my, you know, from what I knew as religion and looking for spirituality. And it was very interesting, you know, as I progressed and I got into Eastern philosophy. I'm Jewish, you know, and I got into Eastern philosophy and Buddhism and all these different things. And I would go to Unity and I go to healing services, a Catholic service where they actually had catchers, you know, they would touch you when you were catchers. Oh, yeah. I tried anything, you know, I was into that. And it was like, that has been as big a journey for me, I think, too. And it's the newest piece, I think, that I'm most I think I'm supposed to talk about is my spiritual journey, which I always sort of put it in the background. But I think as my purpose has evolved, I think that's part of it, is sharing that journey, because I've always been searching. And it's so interesting because of COVID. My sister's in Florida, I'm in Chicago, and she got their Zentangle. They have this, they're teaching Zentangle at this Jewish Soul Center in Maryland. So she said, why don't you try it? So I did. I'd never done Zentangle. She'd been doing it. And I did, and I enjoyed it. And then I realized they have a religious service, they call it gratitude, but it's also all the prayers that they say every morning for a minyan. And I've been going for 5 weeks now, every morning. I'm like, who are you? And my son is like, who are you? What have you done with my mother? And we're having, but it fits who I am, because it's about breath work, it's meditation. The rabbi says, get out your gratitude journal. Well, this fits my parameters of what religion could be. It's joining the traditional prayers with all this other stuff. So I think as I'm going through this and we're talking, my newest purpose is to start sharing those stories, because as part of my healing, at one point, and this was long before they ever did any memoirs, I had, I was writing a book called The Odyssey of Healing, Survivor to Thriver. And I talked about my tools, my toolbox, which nobody ever talked about, any spirituality, and they weren't talking about any of this stuff. And I had gone to the healers of the time. I was telling you about that conference. And it was Joan Boroshenko, it was Jean Shinobola, Larry Dossi. They were all the premier speakers at that time. And I gave them a copy of my memoir. And everybody said, oh, this is nice, but you need more. You need more stories. And so I went back, and I went back, and I was really disappointed, but I also had a master's in urban planning. I knew how to write a questionnaire. So I wrote a questionnaire. And it was like 13 pages. Again, it was before the internet, so there was no computers. And I got 150 responses, and it really, what amazed me was how many people were really using alternative tools, which nobody was talking about any of these other modalities. It was just talk therapy was the only thing at the time. And it validated everything I said. And I mean, I remembered stories, we're talking, this was like 1990, some woman rehabbed her home and every room was a part of her heart, things like that. I can still hear these stories in my head. And I'd start to write this book, and and I couldn't, it was the voice of, who do you think you are? You're not smart enough. Who's going to believe you? Why would anybody listen? So I never wrote that book. Now I contributed to other people's books. Laura Davis, Courage to Heal. I talked about, forgiveness in one of hers. And then somebody else wrote another book about using art for healing from sexual abuse. So, I did contribute, but these are all stories that I don't think I've really shared enough. And so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this purpose piece, and because my purpose has evolved and changed. And, I wrote a one ad for God years ago. I needed to find a God of my own belief, whether you call it divine love, infinite wisdom, it doesn't matter, so. And the rabbi today in our call said, so why, why do you thank God for loving you? And I'm like, oh my God, it was like full circle, listening to her talk about, almost like asking you to write a one ad for God today. So
yeah, I think it's really interesting. I like the idea of a purpose evolving. And I think that's another thing that art can help you, is if you kind of have a creative expression as part of your daily routine, it can open you to things that you may not be noticing because they're in part of you that just isn't in the forefront of your mind. Right. I'm constantly like, I look at my brain as a kitchen because I'm a baker, and I'm constantly thinking that I know that I have like 8 pots of boiling water somewhere in my brain. And I think that art really helps you kind of notice the ones that you're forgetting to notice.
Yeah.
Constantly processing. I'm definitely a cerebral kind of person, and art helps almost my brain organize it in a way for my eyes and my heart to see. But I love the idea of it always evolving, and that you can have a purpose,
but that it can change as you discover more about yourself and you experience more, just like Lisa was saying, right? Because as you go along, you're going to have experiences that might shape you.
Yeah, I mean, we're all growing, and if we're not growing, then what's the point? I mean, that's my feeling. We have, we're all curious beings, and growth is an integral part of any life, to make it, to me, valuable. That's one of my core values is learning and evolving. So yeah, and I'm glad. I love discussions like this because it does bring up things that you don't necessarily think about, but it's been gelling in the back of my mind. But to actually say it out loud, it's sort of like, well, maybe I need to actually write like an ebook on my spiritual journey, and include some of my artwork because I found where I found God is in nature. That is where my connection is. And so many of my pieces over the last few years always incorporate, animals, birds, leaves, flowers, trees for that reason. Yeah.
What I love, what I hear and I'm loving is that it's almost like art makes you remember that you're a holistic being,
Yeah.
It's like we forget that, we are mind, body, spirit. And it's almost like the art of living, it's almost like art, the scribble, it's like it's transcendence. It's, you can scribble and then you evolve and expand and grow. And then you become art, right?
Right. We are the artists of our own lives. We are creating masterpieces every day. So what do we want it to look like? I guess, do you want it to be the sorrow and the pain, or do you want to look for the bliss and the joy and the wonder and awe? That's where I am. And my artwork is all about using color and texture and things like that for that reason, because I spent a long time in my blue period, I don't want that. I just wanted to show you, this is my latest thing that I've been playing with.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, check that out.
Yeah, so I had taken a class, I took some workshop because of COVID with some woman from New York who was using these mannequin heads and creating all these beautiful art pieces. I said, I think I'm going to try that, and it was like, I got on Amazon, ordered 2 heads, and, they're taking longer than I thought that I would do them, but they're fun and it's evolving. Again, when I do my artwork, and I don't know about you ladies, it's like, I don't necessarily have a plan in mind. I will almost always start with like a scribble and a doodle, just make a mark and see where it goes. So
yeah, I love it. Wow, what a great conversation. Thank you for
joining. I just have one last question for you, Rae.
Yeah,
sure.
Our viewers, what is one nugget of wisdom that you can tell them to begin the scribble process, or something? What do you want to share with the world?
Well, I do want them to start with the scribble process, but I think before that, I think you've got to get into a state of gratitude, just because it opens you up to more. If you're so closed off, I mean, if you can I believe in the practice of writing gratitude, again, it gets you out of your head. It's not the same, and if you can do it by hand versus a computer, you're even better off, because your neural pathways, they're better that way. Yeah. But I would say if you can start with 3 gratitudes in the morning and 3 at night, it will open you up. That's part of it. And then you can start playing in your imagination. Look for images. I do a lot of vision board work with people where if they don't have an idea what's calling to them, I say, go start looking through, now it's Pinterest. There's not as many magazines as there used to be, but, go on Pinterest or get some magazines or cards at the dollar store. And instead, I say, don't cut anything out, rip it out. Because again, it's a very, the sound makes a difference. The physical act makes a difference. And start collecting images and words that talk to you. And, put them in an envelope. Don't look at them right away. Put them away. And then one day just take them out and start seeing if there's any themes. Is there anything that you see, anything, words that jump out at you, that kind of thing. I even do that with a magazine, like especially used to be when I was in the airport, I take a page of a magazine and I just circle the words that call to me, and then I'd write something about it.
Oh,
love it.
It was like, those words, and then whatever. And it just sparks something. So I think those are ways to really start your process of whatever you want to do to find it. My book, The Creative Activist, has questions that lead you on a journey of personal development and activism as well. So that's another way. And as I said, call me if you really, contact me through Messenger, Rae Luskin, and we can set up a, you know, a heartstorming session if you're ready to play a little bit and to see what is your passion and purpose? Where do you want to go?
I love it, because what I'm hearing from you is that, like, don't worry about the why part yet. You don't have to worry about the why you're doing it. You just need to do it, right? Like,
Right.
you just need to pick up that pencil and scribble. Or I love the idea of, you know, just like even if you aren't a magazine or card person, just go walk outside or go walk around your house and take pictures with your phone of things that are calling out to you. And then you don't need to know why they are, but
Right,
you can.
not at all. You know, it's like, and yeah, I mean, I take my grandchildren to nature. I've been trying to go out even in the winter. I have more snow pictures this year than I've ever had in my life. You know, and so, yeah, and it calls to me, you know, that is my calling, and that is my, you know, there's something there. You know, and then have conversations with people who you respect and love. I think that's another piece of this. Find somebody who will support you in whatever it is that you're thinking about, and doesn't you know, that will listen. You know, start the conversation. Please, I'd really like you to listen to what I'm talking about first. You don't have to fix me. You don't have to change me, but respect, you know, that I'm going through a process right now. And these are some of the thoughts that are coming up for me.
I love it. I love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This was a
Yes.
rich, juicy conversation, and I hope it inspired people to take an art break, start
Yes.
scribbling.
Oh, definitely. And there's so many ways to take your art break. I mean, you're right. Get outside, take a photo, at least one a day, you know, and it could be in a hallway. I live in a condo, and sometimes I'll just take the light on the window, you know, or whatever. So, yeah.
Love it. Love it. All right. And we'll put all your info when we update the video so people can get in touch with you.
Okay. And then I will go ahead and I will start circulating it. And I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. And again, anytime that I can help or be of service to you guys or collaborate with you, I'd love to.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like the three of us would do a fabulous workshop. Honestly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, let's do a
Yeah,
workshop.
let's do it.
I think so. I mean, I could see that between, you know, where we each are on our journey and what we're trying to accomplish. I could see that easily.
That'd be awesome.
Okay.
All right. Next time.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
All right.
Bye. Thanks.